From the television studios of the Jack J. Valenti School of Communication at the University of Houston, this is Graffiti, the electronic newsletter of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. My name is John David Powell. Swine flu, or rather the history of the flu, is the topic of our discussion this month with Helen Valier, a member of our history faculty and instructional assistant professor and coordinator of the Medicine and Society program in the Honors College. Professor Valier received her undergraduate degree from the University of Cambridge and her master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Manchester. She joined the UH faculty in 2005. Her latest book is a comparative account of post-World War II cancer chemotherapy research and clinical research policy in the United States and the United Kingdom, for which she makes extensive use of local medical and public archives, this time in the Houston area. Her new book takes particular account of sources relating to the history of the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center and the treatment of cancer throughout South Texas. And as I said, though, swine flu is our topic, and thank you for being with us, especially on short notice. So we're all talking, and can't say swine flu because that makes the pigs feel bad about themselves and folks who raise pigs or eat pigs. So it's the, what is it, the H1N1 virus.
That's right.
But we have seen something like this before, and that was back before some of us, well, not some of us, but some of those folks were around. That was back in the Ford administration in the early to mid 70s, or the early 70s.
Certainly. Well, we see H1N1 emerging for the first time in 1917, and this leads to the 1918
1917?
Flu. Yes, this leads to the 1918 flu pandemic.
That was the one that killed
That was the one that killed many millions, so some estimates of up to 40 or 50 million people. Now, the reason why this looms such large, it's so large in any debate, is of course because it killed so many people. But there are particular reasons why it did so. When a new virus emerges, it will likely spread and cause a pandemic, and this is always the concern because people don't have any immunization from it. I mean, they're not naturally immune because they've been brought up with it, growing up with it, and this is what you get in 1918. But you've had that throughout human history. I mean, we've always lived with disease. If we want to live with other people in cities, in towns, and we live with other people, we live with them coughing on us, we live with each other's waste, we live with the contaminated food, we live with disease, and we always have done. Indeed, if we want to live with animals around us, this is where most infectious diseases come from. They come from animals. Think about measles, that comes from dogs. Think about the common cold, this comes from horses. If you think about tuberculosis, this comes from cows.
The common cold comes from horses?
Yes, rhinovirus, yes.
Ah, so I thought it came from rhinoceros.
And indeed, also the flu, which comes from primarily from ducks and pigs. Okay. So we've always sort of lived with this sort of cross transfer. That's not new, but what is new in the 20th century is the end of the war brought about huge shifts in populations, huge shifts in troops, and it's really that use of new technologies, transportation, that we're able to move people quickly and across the world, and indeed because so many continents were involved in that war. I mean, you've got swine flu spreading down Africa because of the French troops stationed in Sierra Leone. You've got American troops coming back to the States and spreading swine flu there, and so it's really a kind of technologically enabled spread, which is very indicative of our modern age. In the second reason why it killed so many people is just purely because there weren't the medicines around then that there are today. I mean, one of the primary causes of death if you contract flu is pneumonia, and pneumonia can be treated fairly easily if you're healthy with penicillin. And so again, it's this kind of pre-penicillin, post-penicillin world we live in. Now, in 1976, you have a re-emergence of a different type of H1N1, and again, the fear is the same, that you're going to have, because it's a new type and because there's no natural immunity present in the population, that again you're going to have a pandemic. Now, that virus did not lead to a pandemic outbreak. It killed one soldier in Fort Dix.
The virus itself killed one soldier.
The virus itself killed one soldier.
But the immunization was quite deadly.
Well, this was the problem, because you know, a huge public health campaign went into action. This is led primarily by the CDC, who then contact President Ford, and President Ford, you know, signs this into law. And you know, what happens is you have a very, very quick set of decisions that get a lot of vaccine together, and the idea is that you're going to vaccinate the entire US population. And indeed, between, I think it's October and December, you've got some 40 million people being vaccinated, 1 million of those in the first week. Mm-hmm. So you know, you have a lot of uptake, but you know, it's very, very patchy. So for instance, you know, in Houston, you've got less than 10% of the population, whereas in Texas as a whole, you've got about 25%, and then other states have more or less. But you know, that's a slightly separate issue. But but yeah, you know, you have this this wholesale response to vaccinate. But what is happening in the spread is that yes, there's human-to-human transmission at Fort Dix and the barracks on the East Coast, but there's no spread outside of that. And what you start to have instead, because you've got the press kind of monitoring everything, what you have instead is the press starting to monitor the debates and controversies over vaccine. And vaccinations, I mean, since vaccinations were introduced in the 1870s, they've always been a source of controversy. And one of the reasons for that is because it pits the individual's health and well-being against the needs of the state and the community. And so you've got that kind of, you know, clash of ideas about autonomy versus the public benefit. And it plays out all over the world in all different kinds of vaccination, anti-vaccination campaigns. So you've got that going on as well. Into this come the press, who are starting to hear about cases of Guillain-Barré, which is you know, possibly a side effect of the vaccination. Mm-hmm. And you know, in almost kind of Vietnam War type terms, they start doing a kind of body count. You know, of like, you know, who died today of Guillain-Barré. So it's yeah, it's this sort of very, very morbid and you know, extremely undermining of the medical bureaucracy and the medical decision-making process, and so that's really the, you know, the legacy of that.
Well, we're already doing something like this part of the body count. As we're speaking today, a report comes out that 40% of all cases of flu cases are now swine flu. We have 2,000 cases in 43 states, 94 hospitalizations, 3 deaths, mm-hmm. Possibly 700 suspected cases. Mm-hmm. So in the short time we have here, what lessons, you can't predict the future mm-hmm. from the past, but you can learn some lessons from the past. Mm-hmm. So what lessons should we learn from 30 years ago?
Well, what we should learn is to deal better with uncertainty. That you know, saying there's a 12 or a 15 or a 25% risk of a pandemic doesn't mean very much to people. It's not easily communicated in the press, and it looks like inaction if you're not doing anything. So the pressure is to either do nothing or to do everything. And there's a lot of middle ground mm-hmm. there. There are a lot of alternative strategies that we can employ, including watchful waiting, but watchful waiting seems like doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And you know, if you have a wholesale move to action like you did in 1976, then you have to, for the sake of the credibility of the medical bureaucracy, you have to then start to pressurize people into vaccination, and that I think is going to be a real tense issue this summer if that starts to happen. But at the same time, there's a press to, you know, to do some kind of action coming from all quarters.
So you have this fine line of whether if you go out and you do something and nothing happens, then the next time it comes along, people think you're crying wolf.
Right, and that's what's happened in '76. That you have, you know, perfectly respectable scientists now, you know, coming into the media and saying, '76 was a massive overreaction. Let's not do that again. Now, I mean, yes, you know, yes and no historically. I mean, I mean, Censor at the head of the CDC. I mean, he had a good case when he first went to his committee in early '76, but then when the ball started rolling, and again it was like a binary on-off. You know, you either go all the way or you don't do anything. Once that decision has been made and the momentum builds, there's very little you can do then without confusing people and losing credibility to actually go back and change anything about that policy.
Well, as a historian, This will give you something to
Something
study
to do,
in the years to come.
Thank you.
Helen Valier, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very
and,
much.
Talking about the history of the swine flu and what we can expect. And thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next month.